Mr. Madoff, what would you say to all those people that lost money, Mr. Madoff? What would you say to them?
So what's it like talking to one of the biggest white-collar criminals in the history of civilization? Steve Fishman of New York Magazine has a pretty good idea. He's been talking to Bernie Madoff. He joins us now to discuss those conversations and also your article published today. First of all, Steve, what did you think when the phone rang, a collect call from prison in North Carolina saying Bernie Madoff was on the other line?
It was a huge surprise. I had been chasing Bernie and trying to talk to him. I'd done several articles about him. So I imagined this moment, and then suddenly it happened. And, you know, it's strange because you have all this kind of idea about who he is, this evil mastermind, and then you pick up the phone and he sounds like my uncle.
I kept on, you know, sort of telling myself, you know, that some miracle was going to happen or that I was going to be able to work my way out of it, okay? I just didn't know, I just didn't know what that was.
Why do you think he spoke to you? I mean, one can imagine how many letters from journalists have gone to Bernie Madoff in prison, how many phone calls have gone unreturned. What do you think it was, Steve? Why you?
Yeah, well, I suppose my charm probably didn't come across through the letter. You know, some of it's just luck, obviously. I think, listen, I happened to reach out to Bernie Madoff, which I think sincerely an appeal that resonated with him. He wanted to tell his story. Also, don't forget that his son Mark had recently committed suicide. His remaining son Andrew had cut him off. His wife had stopped speaking to him. I mean, there's a way in which Bernie was isolated at that moment, even more than he ever had been. And sometimes I had the feeling in speaking to him and him speaking to me that perhaps he was trying to reach out to his family.
Look, I try to give monies back to my clients, to the individual clients, when I realized that it was impossible for me to get myself out.
Right.
I tried to return funds to my friends. I tried to return monies to the smaller clients and so on. They wouldn't take it back.
Looking at the content of the interview, I think it was some 12 phone calls that went on for hours each. You talk about the issue of greed, and Madoff does lay some of that greed on banks, on hedge funds, and on individual investors, saying, look, I even told some people, take your money out, take it now. They wouldn't. The banks, I wouldn't let them in to see the operations and do their due diligence, but they remained with me. He's sort of saying that their greed left them as investors with him. He's passing on this greed.
Yeah, Bernie Madoff clearly wants to share the responsibility. Now, he acknowledges responsibility, but you're absolutely right that you know, there's something to acknowledge it and then there's something to suffer from it. And you feel that Bernie really wants everybody to understand that it wasn't just him, which, by the way, may be true, but are we supposed to feel bad for Bernie Madoff? Obviously not. I mean, the point for Bernie, or that he once understood, is that, you know, he was telling people, sophisticated hedge funds and banks, I'm not going to tell you how much volume I'm doing. I'm not going to tell you my strategy. If you don't like it, take your money out. You know, I've got an accountant in a little storefront in Westchester. You know, you don't like it, take your money out. And nobody did. So there's an argument to be made, whether it's Madoff making it or not, that there was a degree of nod and wink involved in this.
We hear these hints from Madoff, that saying, you know, these banks weren't innocent in all of this. They were complicit in a way. You saw it in the New York Times article as well. So the question is, what does Bernie Madoff want to come from that? Is he waiting to see prosecutors go after these banks and some of these individual investors? Is that the sense you got, Steve?
Well, we didn't talk about that, but my guess would be that, yeah, he would like that. He feels that other people should share the blame. Not to get too far afield, but Madoff, I think, sees a parallel between what went on in Wall Street with the complicity of all kinds of banks and what went on in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. And he, whilst accepting responsibility, that doesn't quite kind of grip him as an idea. He doesn't quite want to be the person who shoulders all the blame. That's not the way he's built, frankly. Bernie Madoff, and he said this to me, and it comes off again and again. He's a very practical guy. He's not somebody who's built. I asked him at one point, I said, did you have suicidal thoughts? And he said, no, that's not the way I'm built. That's not the way I'm built.
What was the most raw moment of your hours of conversation with him?
It was probably when I asked him about his son's suicide, and there's quite a long answer that he gives where he tells me how he doesn't come out of his cell for days on end, and the guards have to wake him up, and he cries endlessly, and he assures me that he has tears in his eyes, and if you think I'm okay, I'm not, and never will be.
Never will be.
That's what he says. Now, you know, at that point, or perhaps it was somewhat earlier, I said, you know, Bernie, nobody's going to feel sympathetic for Bernie Madoff. And he said, I know, I agree. And that's where you have.
So what's ahead from here? Do you expect more conversations with Madoff? Do you want to elaborate on this reporting, meet him in person? These were all over the phone. I mean, what's next for your relationship with Bernie Madoff?
I hadn't thought of it as a relationship. I think Bernie's a fascinating topic, and I don't mean to sound distanced from it. He caused an enormous amount of suffering, and I'm not sure he really understands the full extent of the suffering, frankly. But probably, as with most journalists, I think that even subjects that are difficult and even subjects that are evil should be understood and explored up close, and I think that's one of the jobs we ought to be doing.
The afternoon I told them all this, you know, they immediately left. They went to their lawyer. They went to a lawyer. The lawyer said, you got to turn your father in. They went, did that, and then I never saw them again.
Wow. Well, you're talking about your sons, Mark and Andy.
My sons and my brother.